I'm Park Howell, and welcome to the Business of Story.
I thought it was just a stupid picture of a pig in the ocean. But after hearing that story, I had to have it. Now I wasn't just buying a picture. I was buying a story. Story literally made the picture worth more money to me.
That's what businesses are about. People buy brands. People buy stories much more than anything else.
I work with a lot of big enterprise companies, but let's just say I always tell folks, drop the PowerPoint, close your laptops, start with your story.
If you want people to get engaged and you want people to act, you have to tell them an emotionally powerful story. That's with great characters, it's with uncertain outcomes, and it's with high stakes and drama.
All business strategy is a story.
What do pirates, dreamers, and innovators know about dominating a market category for their brand? And how can you use this knowledge for your own epic story? Well, that's what we're exploring today with who has been described as the Howard Stern of marketing, Christopher Lochhead. Christopher is an accomplished high-tech marketer and self-described surf bum from Santa Cruz, California, and one of the top market category designers in the industry. He believes that winning today isn't about beating the competition at the old game. It's about inventing a whole new game, defining a new market category, developing it, owning your story, and dominating it over time. You can't build a legendary company without first building a legendary category. If you think that having the best product is all it takes to win, you're probably going to lose. So in this episode, you'll learn how not having a formal education is often a decided advantage for entrepreneurs. I guess that's where the pirates come from. What brands like Spanx, Bird's Eye Foods, Netflix, and the Ramones have in common as brand category dominators, and the quintessential power of the point of view story to design, create, and dominate your own category. And by the way, there's a bonus. You'll also learn how to prosecute the magical triangle. That's right, prosecute the magical triangle. You'll just have to listen to hear what that means. So let's get after it today with the creator and purveyor of category kings, Christopher Lochhead. Hey, Christopher, welcome to the show.
Park, it's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
You know, I first heard about you a couple months ago. I think one of your agents or somebody, one of your flying monkeys out there reached out to me and said, hey, this guy'd be great on your show. And I looked at it and I said, yeah, I'm booked and whatever, but we'll definitely get him on. And then I was coming back from my story session at Social Media Marketing World. And I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he buttonholed me and he said, hey, I've been sending you notes. You've got to get Christopher on your show. And you know what totally sold me? Was the subhead to your book. Your book, Play Bigger, How Pirates, Dreamers, and Innovators Create and Dominate Markets. And then he went on to tell me about your focus on category developing brands that create categories and just dominate and own because of it. So I love the rebel nature to everything that you're about, and it's just so great to have you on the program.
Well, geez, thank you so much, Park. And I love that you love pirates, dreamers, and innovators. So do we. Arr, right? It's just, and if you think about it, anybody who makes any dent, anybody who makes a difference has got some component of pirate, dreamer, and innovator in them, don't they?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, Steve Jobs making a dent in the universe, I suppose you could say he was all three of those.
Yeah, and I mean, I know a lot of entrepreneurs who are all three, and some that are more than others, of course. But I think you have to have that a big idea and big dream, and I think you have to be willing to storm the castle and maybe slay some dragons and deliver something, if I could say, legendary.
Well, you've been called a lot of things in marketing, and good things, I might add at that. The human exclamation point Fast Company called you. The Marketing Journal says one of the best minds in marketing. What was the one I liked? Christopher Lochhead is the Howard Stern of entrepreneurialism. Hard to say. But just with less hair. So what is your backstory and how have you created this category for yourself?
So, well, thank you, Park. That's very kind of you to say. My backstory is I got thrown out of school at 18 for being stupid. And
okay, but what'd you do? You got to tell us what you did.
I really just got D's and F's. Like I didn't get caught doing anything particularly nefarious, although I did my fair share of nefarious things. I just didn't get caught for them. It turns out if you get enough F's over enough period of time, they throw you out.
They think you're not paying attention or taking it seriously, I think it is.
Which was both were probably true in my case.
Yeah.
And I did find out later at 21 that I was dyslexic. And so that sort of, made a lot of that make sense. But anyway, we can talk about it if you like, but that's a different story.
Okay.
And so at 18, really my options were, I had a manual labor job. I was working as an orderly in a hospital. And then I had a buddy of mine who had gotten a job at a small software company and was urging me to help him start a technology company. And so I looked at it and said, well, I could shave guys' balls for the rest of my life, or I could help Jack start this company and see what happens. And so that's what I did. And, you could think, the way I think of it is a small E entrepreneur, no money, no relationships, no education, no experience, just a dream, so to speak. And somehow you figure it out after that. And I think there's a lot of, small E entrepreneurs in the world who bootstrap themselves, out of one life into another one. And so for me, entrepreneurship was really, for some people, it's a way up, if you will. For me, it was more of a way out. And after that, ultimately, I ended up having a company in Toronto, Canada. I'm originally from Canada. I grew up in Montreal. And that company in Toronto got acquired 20 years ago by a Silicon Valley software company. And so I've lived in the Silicon Valley area since then, and most notably been the chief marketing officer of 3 publicly traded tech companies, the last of which we sold to Hewlett Packard for around $5 billion, making HP my favorite company of all time.
Absolutely, understandably. And did you come across this as a natural entrepreneur? Is it just something street smarts and, you're willing to do about anything to make a buck, get you here? Or what?
Yeah, I think I would call it street smarts. I would call it being a scrapper, being a fighter. I grew up at an interesting time in history in Quebec, Canada, where, the English and French were not exactly getting along. And so we sort of grew up in a pretty scrappy environment, And, I wouldn't say we were poor, but we were certainly, not high end. That's for damn sure. And so, there was some struggle, but I most importantly, Park, I grew up in a family with a lot of love. I have extraordinary parents. I was surrounded with incredible grandparents. And so whatever might have been going on anywhere else, that was always very, very clear.
Did they teach you entrepreneurialism as a kid? I mean, was your mom or dad doing it, or was there something that drove you in that?
My dad definitely has an entrepreneurial streak for sure. But it wasn't. Business was not a prevalent discussion, and I had seen my grandfather struggle in business and fail at one point, and so it wasn't. Most of my family worked in government jobs, hospitals and teachers and things like that, and so there were strands here and there, if you will, of entrepreneurship, but it wasn't like that's not who we were, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. So you ended up in Silicon Valley, and you were head of marketing for 3 different companies there. What was it about Silicon Valley that you liked, or did you feel like you really found yourself at home there?
It really was feeling like I was at home. The first time I came to Silicon Valley, I was in my, I think early 20s. And my eyes just got huge. There was Oracle's headquarters, and there was Intel, and all these incredible companies, these historical companies, and Hewlett Packard, and so forth. And Sand Hill Road, where all the legends in VC were, and so forth and so on. And I just thought, you know what? If you're going to be in this fucking business, then you need to be here. Country music. Folks moved to Nashville for a reason, and actors moved to Hollywood for a reason, and investment bankers moved to Wall Street for a reason. And I just thought, you know what? I need to be here. I'm energized here, And I had a chip on my shoulder, Park. I had things I needed to prove. I thought at the time to the world, and of course, over time you realize the only person you're proving anything to is yourself. But that said, I wanted to prove to myself that I could play in the big leagues, and I was energized here.
So was it because of what happened to you in your educational realm that you got thrown out and you're working as an orderly at a hospital that you felt like you had to prove to the world that you were smart, that you could do this?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I also, I wanted to live up to who my family said I was. I have a very loving and supportive family, an incredible mom. And, when I was a little boy, my grandfather, my Scottish grandfather, Jack, would tell me with his Scottish accent, "Oh, you're the bestest boy in the world," and so I wanted to live up to who my mom and dad and grandfather said I was.
How did not having an education or formally trained in marketing actually help you?
So I'm going to answer the question, and I want you to know I don't mean it in any kind of pejorative way. I had no choice. So this was not like, an option I took. So with that said, it's, for me, an extraordinary asset because I think in unconstrained ways. And I know intuitively when we need more data and when we should trust our gut. I developed an ability to take complex things and synthesize them and make them fairly simple, which is another reason I love your show, because people who understand complex things that are important need to learn how to explain them to folks. I appreciate it when I hear a great scientist on a podcast teaching me something about physics that is just totally cool that I never got. I love it when people can do that, and so I learned to do those things.
And so how does that play out in your book, Play Bigger? How pirates, dreamers, and innovators create and dominate. So tell us a little bit about what went into that book, your experiences that helped make the book possible, and what is that theme throughout?
Thanks. Well, for me, Play Bigger and the concept behind it, which is called category design, is really the bulk of my professional work, and the creation of Play Bigger with my three co-authors and close friends was really the most extraordinary work project I've ever been associated with. So that said, what the book tries to do is we wanted to open a dialogue around specifically what is it that the legendary innovators do that most of us mere mortals don't? Is there any kind of pattern recognition we could see there? And when I say do, specifically in the area of what most people would initially think of as as marketing, but it's really what do they do in the world? What do they do in the market that's different? Because when most people say marketing, there's an implication about branding, there's an implication about messaging, there's an implication about a feature discussion and a product discussion, there's an implication about comparison and many other implications. So here's what the book introduces. When most innovators or entrepreneurs go to be successful, they essentially pull two levers, if you will. One is product. They try to build a legendary product. And the second is company, a legendary company and or business model to deliver on that product. And there's an almost unquestioned belief, like how you and I don't question the existence of oxygen until we're underwater. We go, holy shit, no oxygen, right?
Right.
There's an unquestioned belief that kind of the best product wins. And what I need to do is market the product because I built this legendary carbidingulator. And if I have a good company with a good business model behind it, I'm going to crush everybody. And in other words, the innovator saw a problem and a solution and therefore a product in a very special and particular way, and makes the mistaken assumption that the world, when it sees the product or service, will connect all the same dots that the innovator or entrepreneur did. And sometimes the world does. And the product, if you will, speaks for itself, and a new category gets formed, and the company emerges to be the category king. But most of the time it doesn't. And so what Play Bigger reveals is that third thing. So if you unpack what Sarah Blakely, the category designer of Spanx, did, what you see is she built a legendary company, product, and category. And so what I mean in specific, Park, is I'm saying if she had called Spanx a girdle 2.0, as opposed to what she did call it, which was shapewear, I would say to you, the likelihood she would be a billionaire sitting on top of a company she owns. I think she owns it completely. And she dominates the category that she created. I would propose to you that if she called it a girdle 2.0, that probably wouldn't have happened. She created a unique place in the world, in the minds of customers for herself, and she now owns that place. And she's not compared to anything from a competitive point of view. She's compared to what it used to be like when you had to jam your ass into a girdle.
So the question I have, in fact, she does a beautiful job of telling her story on one of my favorite podcasts, How I Built This. I'm constantly pushing that. I don't know if you've had a chance to listen to it. She is a marvelous storyteller, but telling the story about Spanx, I don't know, do you think that she actually had it in her mind that I'm going to create a whole new category? Or was it something that she saw a need and the added value of that need happened to be a whole new category? I don't know that she went after it from a category design. It just so happened she had such a great product at just the right time that it created a category. Would you agree with that? I mean, do they happen back into it in some cases?
The subtleties here are incredibly important because I don't want people to quote Archie Bunker, misconstrue this. See if we can unpack it a little bit. Do I think that Sarah sat there and said, I'm going to try and build a legendary product, company, and category at the same time, and therefore product design, company design, and category design are equally important, and I'm going to execute in the market a category design strategy? No, I don't think that happened at all. And that's not what happened with the vast majority of category designers. So let me be explicit. Category design is an attempt to take Sarah or Steve Jobs or Henry Ford and take what they did intuitively or implicitly and make it explicit. What did they do that was different in the way they brought their products to the world that most people don't do? And here's the big aha. Problems create categories. And so category designers evangelize a problem in a particular way. And when the world gets their problem and their definition of that problem, the world can't unsee it anymore. And so once you then have a problem, you get a solution. You have to buy the solution. I'll give you a specific example. One of the stories we talk about in Play Bigger, the book, is so fun. It's about a category designer and entrepreneur named Clarence Birdseye. And he is the category designer of a new category of food called frozen food. Because before Clarence, there was two kinds of food. There was food and there was canned food. And so here's what happens. Clarence in the 1920s as a boy, maybe even a little bit earlier than that, is like a lot of young men today into taxidermy, Park. And oh, come on. That was at least a little funny. Wasn't that at least a little freaking funny?
I'm taking notes.
Okay. So
they're laughing with us out there in podcast.
I hope they're probably laughing at me, but that's okay.
No.
So he ends up getting a job with the Forestry Service, and he ends up in the far north of Canada with the Inuit people. And he notices something when they go fishing. If they catch a fish and eat it pretty quickly thereafter, or they catch a fish and freeze it in the ice and eat it later, it essentially tastes the same. So he says, wow, what if we could freeze food en masse? What would that mean? And of course, it was a giant breakthrough in the industry, and really, you could argue for humanity, a huge contribution. And then so he goes back and he makes it all happen, and ultimately convinces the entire ecosystem. He convinces DuPont to commercialize cellophane to wrap the stuff. He convinces the railroads to have refrigerators, cars. He convinces the grocery stores to buy these special refrigerators for the stores and then to stock the stuff. But most importantly, and these are the terms we use in the category design vernacular, conditions the market. He educates the market. And so when you go back and look at the early Bird's Eye Foods ads, what you see, Park, is stuff like, I forget the exact headlines, but things like, isn't it a bummer we can't get fresh peas in February? And so what he's doing is he's framing a problem. See, because before Clarence, nobody said, hey, where are my fresh peas in February, man? Because we didn't, in other words, you and I in the 1920s and 1930s before frozen food, we didn't know that was a problem. It's just, that's how it was.
Yeah, so these big thinkers, they come across something and the entrepreneur fires up in them and says, wait, there could be a market out there for frozen food. They don't necessarily think about creating the category at that point. They're just like, there's a need here and I have an answer to it. So they create a story around the problem. They frame the problem and let people know, I guess, rise that to the top of the surface to say, whether you realize it or not, you actually have a problem here that I can fix by, in this case, selling you frozen food. But he sounds like he not only created a category, but an entire industry in that respect.
That's exactly right. And why I've been so stoked to come on with you is because how category designers do this. They shift the world from where it is to where they want it to be. And so how they design the category is by framing the problem, and how they communicate the problem, and therefore, of course, the solution is they tell a story, and a particular kind of story called a point of view. And here's what I would tell you. The category makes the brand, not the other way around.
Absolutely.
So Xerox has a legendary brand. No one gives a shit because category violence has happened. It's all moved. In 1999, Michael Dell, legendary, on the cover of every magazine. The company sold servers, desktops, laptops, and storage. Company sells the same products today, has the same legendary brand. No one gives a shit. Why? Cloud, social, mobile, virtualization, all those new categories emerged and destroyed the old categories. And the potency of Dell's brand has got nothing to do with nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I would say to you is the story makes the category and the category makes the company. Because here's the big aha in the book. We did over $500,000 of primary data science research. And in specific, one of the things we tracked, Park, was all of the venture-backed technology companies founded in the United States from 2000 through the end of 2015, who backed them, how they grew over time in valuation, that is to say, value. What happened, that is to say, did they go public, get acquired, or are they still independent? And in the categories they compete in, what percentage of the market cap of the category goes to the market or category leader? So not market share, but market cap, that is to say, total value created in the category. And the answer to that question is 76%. And so what I'm saying to you is, the company that gets all three right, product, company, and category, or as we say in Play Bigger, prosecutes the magic triangle. The first company to get that right, as long as they can keep executing, and that's a big thing to keep doing, so I'm not minimizing that any way, shape, or form, but if they can keep executing after they prosecute the magic triangle, they're going to end up with 2/3 of the economics and become the category king in the space. And if you look at it, in space after space after space, it's true. And the other thing that's true is when somebody does a head-on attack on a category king, they almost always get crushed. It's almost always a suicide mission because category kings are impossible to move with a head-on attack. What moves a category king is when the category shifts.
And the category shifts, does it shift by a new entrance into the market, or does it shift by purely market and cultural dynamics?
Well, both. But the interesting thing about the market and cultural dynamics is they talk about market and cultural dynamics like the way the weather guy on TV talks about what the weather is going to be in Santa Cruz, California tomorrow. Like use Dell as an example. You read stuff in publications that say Dell is suffering because of the downturn in the server market, as if the server market is rain.
Mm-hmm.
And what they don't understand is something that Michael Gerber taught us all, the better part of 30 years ago now, which is our businesses are not a function of the economy. The economy is a function of our businesses. That is to say, if you have designed a category around a problem and you've made that problem urgent and important and worthy of solving and investing in solving, people are going to do that no matter what. They will prioritize that because they value it.
Mm-hmm. And it comes back to how well you frame that story about what the problem is. And of course, the problem has to actually exist. So it's got to be a non-fictional problem, something that's out there, but maybe something that's not readily apparent to your market. Is that right?
Well, there's two kinds of problems. There's a known problem reimagined, and then there's a problem that people don't know they have.
Mm-hmm. So give us an example of a known problem reimagined.
I'll give you one of my favorites. So as I mentioned, I live in beautiful Santa Cruz, California, and I'm a surfer, and I live very close to where the entrepreneur, inventor, and category designer of the wetsuit category lives. His name is Jack O'Neill. And back pre-Jack, if you wanted to go surfing in Northern California, you wore some kind of trunks and a wool sweater. And depending on the time of year and how sunny it was and so forth, you could hang for 45 minutes to, maybe an hour and 15 minutes or what, but that would be a long time. And in the winter, you were probably not going to be able to hang that long. And that's just how it was.
Right.
And as Jack famously said, I'm just a surfer who wanted to surf longer. And so he thought, well, surfing with a wool sweater allows me to surf, 45 minutes, half an hour. I'd like to be able to surf for 3 hours. And so he goes to work on rubber. And so that's a known problem reimagined. And then bird's eye is a problem nobody knew that we had.
Mm-hmm.
And so regardless of what type of problem, I mean, it's an interesting thing to be clear about, but regardless of the type of problem, the story of using story as a point of view to frame a problem and educate the world to move from one place to another place holds. So for example, Netflix didn't attack Blockbuster. Reed Hastings, the entrepreneur and the CEO and the category designer of digital movie distribution, said, hey, isn't it a bummer that you have to drive to the video store? And isn't it a bummer that more often than not, they don't have the new movie that you wanted anyway? And isn't it a giant bummer that now you and your 3 other family members are now having an argument at the Blockbuster about what else you might rent? And then isn't it a bummer that you have to talk to the sweaty kid behind the counter to see if you could come up with some other fucking movie that maybe we could all agree, et cetera, right? Oh, and then the biggest bummer of all, then you pay the late fee because you're 2 days late because, you couldn't get there because you were too busy living your life. And so Reed says, to quote the Big Lebowski, this aggression will not stand, man. And he says there's got to be a better way. And so he tells a story about, wouldn't it be wonderful if you could just go to a website, type in all your favorite movies, and then they show up in your mailbox and you can keep them as long as you want for $15 a month or $20 a month or whatever it was. And that's what happened. And so he never attacks Blockbuster. What he does is he educates the category to think about the problem called, how do I get the movie I want on my family TV in a whole new way? And so he reimagines all of that, and then we just stop going. And the Blockbuster guys literally go, hey, what the fuck happened? We were king shit at Turd Island 5 minutes ago, and now nobody comes here.
Yeah. And they're all turned into restaurants, at least in Phoenix, it seems like.
Yeah, I think are they Chuck E. Cheese's or what are they?
No, they're actually fairly decent restaurants that are probably doing some pretty good business. But they were all great locations. The one right around the corner from our house, absolutely everything you said was true. We would run over there with our kids, fight about what we'd get. They would never have it. We'd get something else. We would get home. I would forget to take it back, and the whole thing just pissed you off. But it was cool that you could watch a movie. Well, this is fascinating stuff. I'd like to take a break at this moment for a couple sponsor reads. And when we come back, Christopher, what I really want to talk about is who are some of your favorite category designers, and how do they get there if they weren't looking at the category first? What was that problem story that they were sharing to build this out? So let's cover that right after these messages. Hey, if you were looking for some great summer reading, I highly recommend Shoe Dog, a memoir by Phil Knight, the creator of Nike. Now, we all know the behemoth that Nike has become, but I had no idea the trials and the travails Knight and his team went through when they opened their very first shoe company called Blue Ribbon in 1972, which ultimately became Nike. Knight, with his University of Oregon track coach Bill Bowerman, went toe-to-toe with Adidas and Converse to carve out their own category of elite shoes. And as the story goes, Phil Knight, by the way, is a remarkable storyteller. They were nearly out of business every month for a decade as they dealt with unscrupulous Japanese suppliers, underhanded competition, cold-hearted bankers, and mean-spirited federal tax bureaucrats. The 3 entrepreneurial lessons from Knight in his book that resonated most with me, and that I think are at the heart of Nike and expressed through their story marketing today, are these 3 points. First, no matter what obstacle you encounter, take the next step. That was Phil's thing, man. And, coming from a distance runner, that's not a big surprise, but just take the next step no matter what. Number 2, he said, belief is irresistible. Everybody wants to buy into what it is you believe as long as it suits them. Belief is irresistible. And then finally, this famous General MacArthur quote that served Knight well. You are remembered for the rules you break. Now, here's a poignant passage that sums up the theme of Shoe Dog and the philosophy of Nike since the very beginning. Knight wrote, I'd tell men and women in their mid-20s not to settle for a job or a profession or even a career. Seek a calling. Even if you don't know what that means, seek it. If you're following your calling, the fatigue will be easier to bear. The disappointment will be fuel. The highs will be like nothing you've ever felt. I'd like to warn the best of them, he continued, the iconoclasts, the innovators, the rebels, that they will always have bullseyes on their backs. The better you get, the bigger the bullseye. It's not one man's opinion, it's simply the law of nature. And for that wisdom in this remarkable book and how all of it has been expressed through their stories for decades, Nike gets my Story Marketer of the Week award. I can't thank you enough for listening to my Business of Story podcast. Your notes, tweets, and emails telling me how this program and our amazing guests have helped you live into a more powerful story make it all worthwhile. And yet, coming to you in audio only is the most one-dimensional way I can imagine to reignite within you the one true superpower we all possess, storytelling. So, picture me with you live. That's right, I consult, teach, coach, and speak on the power of story marketing, and I'm ready to do this for you and your people. You can book me for keynotes and workshops, brand story strategy consulting, and live webinars. You can also join me for free every Friday morning at 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time on Facebook Live. During my weekly show, I review the smart story marketers who are making an impact every day with their business storytelling. I take you through an element of the story cycle system that you can immediately apply to your brand story. And I offer up a free tool, tip, or technique that will help you clarify your brand story and rise above the noise of the attention economy. Just follow me on Facebook or join our private group called the Business of Story Raconteurs. We'd love to have you be a part of our story marketing family. So let me help you get your story on by visiting my speaker page at businessofstory.com and start crafting and telling compelling stories that sell. Welcome back to Business of Story, and our guest today, Christopher Lochhead. Christopher is the host of the legendary podcast, Legends and Losers. And what do they say here? A riotous and knowledge-filled road trip that is David Ogilvy, Jack Kerouac, and Hunter S. Thompson rolled up into one. That's pretty high praise, Christopher. And he's also the co-author of Play Bigger, How Pirates, Dreamers, and Innovators Create and Dominate Markets. This has just been such a fascinating show about market creation or category creation. And, Christopher, you and I were talking about this before the show started. In my world, in Business of Story and how I'm helping brands and their leadership and their sales folks get their head around why story actually works and how they can use it. The one thing that's got me sort of sideways in the online world, social media world, is this whole thing about content marketing. Content marketing over and over again. Well, to me, that was certainly a category, I guess, really Microsoft founder Bill Gates mentioned back in like the mid-90s, coined that term content marketing. And to me, it's always been just kind of a placeholder because, yeah, it's content for content's sake, and it means everything from video to words to listicles to whatever. And I get it that we were going from advertising as let me just advertise and throw a bunch of information at you to buy my stuff into creating content that actually invites you into that relationship, that one-on-one relationship or that brand story. But to me, it just doesn't seem to ring true as much today. And I guess in my own way, I'm trying to develop a new category called story marketing. Because content is this very high-level thing, meaning it's just stuff I'm pushing at you. Anything can be content. But stories are much more specific, talking about the actual human impacts, that human connection, especially with professional services in the B2B world that seems to be so void of humanity in their communication, that to me, I am really pushing this category of story marketing because I believe that is what connects in this cacophony of communication out there and really gets us back mano-a-mano with one another, whether we're listening to it, reading it, experiencing it somewhere. We're actually sharing stories about the events that connect our brands, our products and services with our customers and with our audiences.
I couldn't agree with you more. And the interesting thing, Park, is, just like our discussion about Sarah Blakely, did she know she was doing that? No. But she had an intuitive feel about how to approach the market. Now, did you know prior to a discussion about Play Bigger and category design that you would attach to story marketing to design a new category? No, but you intuitively understood there was a distinction you wanted to make. You wanted to distinguish content marketing from story marketing in a way that was very powerful. And you were very passionate about that. And you want the world to understand that distinction. And so by leading with that story about story marketing, you are doing, not to tickle your ivories or anything, but you are doing what every natural pirate, dreamer, or innovator has done when they realize that if they don't position their innovation the way they want it positioned, the world's going to fuck it up somehow. And that's not okay with them. They want to be in a place where they are distinguished from everything that came before and they stand alone. And that's not about branding. It's about a category. And what makes a category is a story about a problem and a solution. And you just essentially laid down what we would call the POV for why story marketing.
The point of view story. So how do you describe or define the point of view story?
So there's three components to the point of view. There's framing the problem, there's the solution, and then there's how you bridge the gap from the problem to solution. So the simplest way to think about it is an infomercial. If you've seen most infomercials, they use the exact same architecture, and it's maybe a blunt way of expressing it, but it's exactly the architecture. So the beginning of the infomercial, I love it. It's often black and white, right, Park? And like, hey, you sitting on the couch at 3 a.m. watching an infomercial, right? Your life sucks and nobody loves you. Nobody wants to have sex with you, right? And then it cuts to color And the guy's got great hair and a great body now. And, it's like, but it doesn't have to be this way. And then, they go on to sell you whatever it is they're selling you. And then the what to do now is operators are standing by. And so, that's a silly example, but the architecture remains, which is we frame the problem in a powerful way. And the interesting thing is that's the big part of it. A lot of people think, okay, well, we spend maybe 10% of the time on the problem and then we go back to our solutions, right? Because entrepreneurs and innovators want to talk about their products and services. That's really what they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, let me tell you all about the features. It slices, it dices, it's a carbidingulator, it's a deconfibrillator, all the stuff because they're in love with it. And we like to say, fall in love with the problem, not the solution.
It's not what you make, but what you make happen. That is about your story. Or what your story is about.
And in particular, a new way of thinking about a problem is what creates a category. So another way to think about it is the problem in business today is we have too many solutions without problems.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens in that circumstance is we get compared to what the world already understands. And so if you think you've created a breakthrough and you don't do category design, you're leaving your story about why you're unique, why you are, and I'm going to use this word on purpose, different, not better, than what came before, then you're going to be lumped in with what came before. And even worse, you're just going to get lumped in some giant bucket. There was a software company recently, Park, that went public called MuleSoft. And if you go to their website and you read about what they do, what you read about is a bunch of carbidingulation, deconfibrillation bullshit. And so what happened was when they go public, they had a very successful IPO. It's great. Fortune magazine, who's full of really smart people who cover tech, couldn't figure out what the fuck they did because of all the carbidingulation speak on their website. And so the headline they get for their very successful IPO, which I stoked for them about, is business software firm MuleSoft, IPO. Mm-hmm. And so my point is, when the world can't figure out what you are, they just lump you wherever they can. And so in the case of MuleSoft, they have this incredibly successful IPO, but because nobody in the world understands what they do other than a very small set of their customers, the entire opportunity to use their IPO to frame a category and to explain to the world what problem they solve and why that matters, and do that in an incredibly powerful way such that they position themselves for greatness, they blew all that because of their carbidingulation speech.
Mm-hmm. I've got the best carbidingulation speech video. Here's a little gift for you if you've not seen it on YouTube. It's called Turbo Encabulator, Encabulator. When we're done here, I'll have you search it and you'll shoot me a note laughing, I'm sure, all the way. In fact, on the show, I will embed the video in our show notes. It is beautiful. It talks exactly about what you're talking about. Jargon monoxide.
I love that. I haven't heard that before. Jargon monoxide. Park, that's awesome.
Yeah, I wish I could claim it. That's my good friend Kathy Klote's guest. She came up with that line about 3 years ago, and I use it all the time because I love it. But I got to give her full credit for that.
I don't know her, but if she came up with that, she's a genius. She's legendary in my book already.
Well, you got to get to know her. She is up in Silicon Valley. She does story marketing. Her take on it, a woman in Silicon Valley, one thing, but she's also a stand-up comic. And she does some really wonderful work with a lot of the big brands up there. So she's probably running around in the same bars.
I would love an introduction.
Yeah, we'll have to make that happen. She's great. Well, tell us about, who are your top 3 mega category builders, the people you really hold on a pedestal, and why?
I think in the modern era, it would be hard to say anybody was a better category designer than Steve Jobs. If you look at the innovation he was able to open the world up to, it was extraordinary. And you think about something as simple as this, Park. If you were to take the iPad division out of Apple, spin it out as an independent company, not only would it be a Fortune 500 company, it would be in the top quarter of the Fortune 500. And so if you think about product, company, and category and getting all those right, he really got those right. We call that prosecuting the magic triangle.
And the magic triangle, again, is product, company, and category.
Yes, sir.
Is that right?
Yeah. And of course, he did it in an incredibly inspiring way and so forth. And then in a different sort of domain, my favorite band of all time is the Ramones. And the Ramones are category designers.
How so?
Well, if you think about when they started in the 70s, and you think about where rock music was at the time, music was getting more and more complex. And, Led Zeppelin, and then more of a experimental progressive rock bands like Yes, and bands along those lines. And then you had super technical guys playing like Peter Frampton. And so music was very technical and so forth. And you had, them experimenting with orchestras, all the shit was going on. Well, if you're four guys, in New York who know three chords and are trying to meet girls, like, oh, fuck, what do we do, right? And so what they did was they started playing, and everybody said to them, wow, you guys make a horrible noise. This is, terrible. And they said, well, no, it's not a horrible noise. It's a different kind of rock music called punk rock. And so you can't listen to punk rock with the same ears that you listen to hard rock or progressive rock. And so in so doing, they literally had to teach the world to listen from a different place, to accept a new criteria for appreciation of music for them to be successful. And when that happened, boom, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
And then literally thousands of other punk rock bands after that. And of course, Bob Marley did the same thing, right? And if you start to look at it, your and my icons in the artistic world, a lot of them in the sporting world. Why is Muhammad Ali the legend that he is? Well, he was a new category of not just boxer, but of athlete, because he crossed over on a massive stage in a massive way to be a social activist, and therefore designed a new category of athlete. Elvis Presley was not the king of rock, not just the king of rock and roll. He was the category king of rock and roll, right? He did exactly the same thing the Ramones did. Of course, he did it first.
Yeah.
And so I guess to get back to your question, every product or service that we love and the vast majority of the innovations we love exist because some pirate, dreamer, or innovator taught the world how to think about something in the way they wanted them to. And when the world accepted their definition, then this whole new thing opens up. That's Pablo Picasso. And it even happens on a social level. That's equal pay for equal work. And we can talk about that if you like. And so what category designers do, Park, is they use story to move the world from where it is to where they want it to be. And in so doing, they open the world up to thinking about something in a whole new way. And when that happens, bang, an entire new market category exists, and you get Facebook, or a whole new style of rock and roll emerges and you get the Ramones, or you get Bob Marley in the case of reggae.
So how do you know you've got an idea, and how do you know that the idea is a solution to a non-existing problem?
So there's a couple ways you get there. One of them is ask yourself, what is different about this? And then write a list. And then go back through the list and ask yourself in a no bullshit way, are the things on this list different or are they better? Because category designers are different. They're not necessarily better. And in some cases, they're worse. I'll give you a simple example. There's a $2 billion new category in the beverage market in the United States that was created by a company called Living Essentials. And they created a product called 4 Hour Energy and a category called the Energy Shot. And they're like more than 10 times more per ounce than Coca-Cola. And they're not a Gatorade competitor. They're not a coffee competitor. And they're not a Coke competitor. They're a whole new thing. And it's predicated on one insight around a problem. And the insight in the problem goes like this. Just because I'm tired doesn't mean I'm thirsty. So an energy shot drink is for when you're tired, not thirsty. And that idea is so powerful, and everything around it, the story they tell, the fact that the product delivers on its promise. So I don't want anybody to, quote Archie Bunker again, misconstrue what I'm saying. I'm not saying products don't matter. Products really, really matter.
They got to deliver on the category promise.
Right? And which his did. And by the way, it tastes like shit. But because the problem's a big problem for enough people, and the product delivers on, to your point, the category promise, people say, I'll tolerate this thing that really tastes like fucking medicine.
But it does something for me. It delivers on that category promise.
So it delivers, what Eric Ries, the author of Lean Startup, a genius book, calls minimum viable product. Mm-hmm. The thing Eric doesn't really talk about is, minimum viable product in the context of what?
Yeah.
And what I would argue is minimum viable product in the context of your exact point, Park, the category requirements. And the category requirements come from the way the aspiring category king uses point of view or story to educate the market to think about a problem in a very particular way. And the company that does that, boom, becomes the category king and takes 2/3 of the economics.
And it's all about the perception. And then you've got to deliver on that perception of the perception your story has created with the actual physical product that delivers something to have that human element. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, and the big different thing that we're talking about is everything you said, I absolutely agree with in the context of the category, not your brand.
Mm-hmm.
The mistake people make is they want to tell a brand story. No one cares unless they get the category. That is to say, I don't care about your solution until I relate to your problem.
Yeah, exactly. You're telling a non-story. Otherwise.
Like if you have, the board short companies that make board shorts for us surfers, right? They're always trying to come out with new fabrics and new this and new that to solve various problems that you have when you're surfing in board shorts, primarily chafing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you want me to buy your new, visor, vinger, dinger, wonger, technology-based board shorts, you got to tell me a story about, chafing that I'm going to relate to, right?
Yeah.
And then I'm going to get that. See, there's an interesting thing that happens in the human brain. We think the person who articulates our problem the best must have the solution.
They get us. They understand what we're going through.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
That's why Clinton's a 2-term president. I feel your pain.
Mm-hmm.
That's why Reagan's a 2-term president against Carter. He has a point of view. He tells a story that is summed up in a very simple tagline, which is, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? By doing that, he frames the context of the conversation. That is to say, he shifts the category, this category called American voters, onto the thinking about the problem called who should I vote for in the way he wants them to.
And Trump did it in a very classic way with his narrative intuition of America used to be great. America's no longer great. I'm going to make America great again.
That's
and
right.
Hillary had no story.
Not only did Hillary have no story, I agree with you 1,000%, Park. It was worse than that. She pulled the product lever. So all of her marketing was centered on, I am the most qualified person ever to run for United States. That's called a feature. That's called, we deliver the pizza in 20 minutes, not 30. So she has a product feature conversation. And let's say look, I don't want to have a political conversation anyway, shape, or form.
Right.
But let's say for sake of argument, those who love her, those who hate her, let's just all say for a second, let's say she was right. And I'm not saying she is. Let's say that was factually correct. The best product doesn't win, man. The best story wins.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying is it's the best story that frames the problem in a very particular way and opens people up to a new kind of solution. That's what category designers do, Park.
And that's where we're going to end today. The best story wins. I absolutely love it, Christopher. I could go on for 3 more episodes with you, and I'm going to have to circle back and bring you on once a quarter, I think, just to talk about more of this. It is so fascinating to me. And it goes back to that whole idea of it's not what you make, but what you make happen. And to make what you make happen urgent and relevant, you better have defined that category through your storytelling better than anybody else. That's ultimately what I got out of this conversation.
Absolutely.
How can people learn more about you? Where can they find your book? What's up next?
The best place to find me is on the interwebs at legendsandlosers.com. Legendsandlosers.com.
And is that your podcast all about category design development, or is it marketing in general?
It's actually broader than that. We do talk a lot about marketing and category design, as you would expect. But as the name suggests, the show is about how do we design a legendary life and a legendary business at the same time. And so the two big things that make us different are, number one, because of the name of the show, Legends and Losers, we talk about both sides of the coin. Our point of view, Park, is can't be a legend without being a loser. So the people who come on Legends and Losers understand they're going to share their story about how they got to be wherever they are, and they need to show, they need to open the kimono a little bit and tell us the truth about some of the pain and suffering and accidents along the way. And then the other thing that makes us really different is, for the most part, particularly in the business domain, when you hear people talk about their life and their career and so forth, it's a fairly constrained conversation around who they are as a business person. Well, guess what? We think that your life is your fucking life. And so people on Legends and Losers, not only do they share how failing contributed to their learning and their success, but they also share about their life, because when you think about it, we all do what we do in our careers and in our jobs, and if we're entrepreneurs or executives in our companies, because that's who we are. That's what we want to be doing in our life. It's about more than just making a living for the vast majority of folks in our world. And so let's have that conversation. And so we open the kimono on losing and winning, Legends and Losers, as well as somebody will say, I sold my company for X billion dollars and yada yada yada, and we're likely to ask, okay, Jim, well, so how did that make you feel?
Or before you sold it, how many times did you almost lose it to resurrect it again and get us to where you are today? Yeah.
And, one of the questions we love to ask too is like, have you made more money than you lost, or have you lost more money than you made? And guess what the answer always is? Always. Always.
Lost more money than they made.
Yeah, we haven't had Bill Gates on, so but who knows? He might even say the same. God only knows.
Well, again, that's why I'm I guess a shill for how I built this on NPR, because you hear the same thing from these legendary brands and category designers, and it's they build it, they lose it, they build it, they lose it, they give up, they don't give up, they get back in, and then they're an overnight success. Yeah, it just seems like it's the exact same story, just told from different points of view. Yeah,
and it's we teach what we most need to learn, and it's a very powerful thing, because here's the thing, like we got the basketball going on right now in the San Francisco Bay Area, and it's very exciting and so forth. And for the most part, if you see an interview with MVP and Bay Area hero Steph Curry, when you hear that dialogue, at least what I hear, Park, is, well, he has like an organ next to his spleen called like legendary basketball organ. And I didn't get one of those fucking organs. And so, it's interesting to hear about his life, and I love him. He's an inspiration to me, but I can't take anything from it because I distance myself, because it's sort of like somebody interviewing Superman.
Yeah.
And so, well, there's a place for that kind of stuff. I don't want to be overly critical. We try to have a dialogue as opposed to an interview and unpack some of this stuff. Like, okay, so it's very easy for you to separate. We just had, for example, 4-star General Stan McChrystal on. Mm-hmm. And his last job was he commanded the U.S. and allied forces in Afghanistan. And he comes on Legends and Losers, and often one of the questions we ask is, tell me something legendary. So I ask him that question, and he says, well, being a grandfather has changed my life. And that's where we start with the general.
Being a grandfather.
Yeah.
That's pretty legendary.
And he shares his regret about that he wasn't around to be a father because he was deployed.
Yeah.
Like right off the top. And so, we are trying to create a platform for dialogue, Park, about how do you design a legendary business and a legendary life at the same time, and we're trying to have a whole lot of fun along the way.
I love it. How do your personal passions drive your professional pursuits? I love it. Well, Christopher, thank you so much for being here on Business Destroyed. Just awesome to have you today.
The pleasure's all mine. Thank you so much, Park.
Thank you all for listening to this edition of Business of Story. Join us next week when we will have another amazing story artist like Christopher Lochhead. And in the meantime, track down his book, Play Bigger, How Pirates, Dreamers, and Innovators Create and Dominate Markets. And of course, jump over to Legends and Losers and check out his podcast. And while you're at it, if you are looking to hone your story marketing, visit me over at businessofstory.com. As you know, I've got tools and techniques and other podcasts and a load of content through the library in my blog that can help you truly craft and tell a compelling brand story that sells. So thank you so much for being here this week. And until next Monday, have a wonderful life.